They brought her out at high sun, when the square was nothing but white heat and eyes. The ground was packed so tight from boots and wagon wheels that it cracked like a skillet left too long on the fire. A single rope dragged behind her wrists, stiff with tar, and every tug rasped against skin already rubbed raw. A cedar board hung from her chest, heavy as stone, letters burned in deep dishonor. The smoke from that branding still clung to it, sweet and bitter like closets and coffins. People didn't need to ask what she had done. Word were already running faster than the flies. She cursed the mare, one spat, stole from her sister's table. Another whispered, "Call the wine down on us." Witches do it quiet. No proof, only breath made sharp by hunger and grief. Out here, a woman's silence could be carved into guilt, and her defiance could be sold for coin. Her name was Loren Bell. Once, Bell had meant milk pails at dawn and a father's steady hand fitting a bridle. Now it was just a tag for the crier's ledger, inked between Lot 11, 2 goats, and Lot 13. Harness, cracked but serviceable. The crowd gathered the way they always did. Men with dust on their hats, women with lips pressed tight to hide the shape of pity, children craning to learn what shame looked like when hung in the sun. A mule shifted against its lead rope, stamping hard, as if even beasts knew the day was crooked. The crier lifted his voice, bored and brittle. Lot 12. 1 Loren Bell. Fit for house or field. Past infractions recorded. Brand available at buyer's request. That word, brand, hung heavier than the noon sky. The girl did not move, did not plead. Only her eyes burned, dark and fixed on the horizon beyond the roofs, as if she could still run there if the rope slipped. And then, from the back of the crowd, a voice cut through the dust. Low, careful, carrying the kind of weight that made men glance before they meant to. "I'll start the bid." The town turned, every head. It was Cole March, a man worn thin by war and widowhood, hat rim gone pale, eyes that carried a quiet no one wanted to hear. The crier's voice cracked against the boards of the square, words bouncing like stones on tin. $10, fair and strong. Do I hear more? Do I hear 12? A ripple of sound passed through the crowd. Not quite laughter, not quite approval. It was the sound towns make when they smell blood that isn't theirs. Men squinted, women whispered, boots shuffled in the dust. From behind his ledger, the clerk raised his chin, watching the faces. His quill tapped once, impatient. 12. It came from a rancher with boots too new for the dirt he stood in, a man with ambition pressed into every crease of his smile. The kind that liked to buy things shiny, break them dull, then buy more. His voice had the brightness of coin in it, sharp, metallic, meant to be heard. Loren felt her stomach drop, as though someone had cut the rope and let her fall into the earth. She'd seen men like that. Hands too quick with stock whips, tongues that never tired of commanding. If she left this square in his shadow, the cedar board against her chest would be the least of her burdens. Cole March's jaw tightened, though no one noticed but her. He still hadn't looked her full in the face, as if her eyes carried weight he couldn't yet lift. His thumb rubbed the rail, working a splinter free, a man measuring his choices in quiet wood dust. 1150, he said low, almost careful. The ledger man frowned. Numbers like that were untidy, like a knife with a nicked edge. But he scratched it down. The crowd rustled again. A mule brayed once, loud, almost mocking. Loren closed her eyes against the heat and the sting of rope burn, against the stink of sweat and cigar smoke that filled the square. Somewhere close, a child whispered, "Her wrists are bleeding," and then was hushed into silence. That silence was the cruelest part, because it wasn't the rope or the brand that made shame. It was how 100 people could watch and say nothing. Her throat worked once. Fear and fury rose in the same breath, snakes tangled together. She knew if she kept quiet now, she would be gone. Just another lot sold, folded into some man's account like feed or fencing wire. Her voice broke the air like a whip crack. "Don't walk away, rancher," she screamed, words tearing raw from her lungs. "Or you'll see me sold again tomorrow." The square went still. For a moment, the wind itself seemed to stop. Cole March finally lifted his eyes to hers. The square breathed as one body, every ribcage frozen. Her cry hadn't just cut the air. It had sliced through the rules of the place. Women did not speak on the block. They did not cry to men who weren't theirs. They did not accuse the town with their own tongues. But Loren Bell had. Her words hit Cole March harder than the heat, harder than the memory of war nights when horses screamed in the dark. He had meant to stand still, to let numbers run their course until someone else bought her, until he could go back to the edge of the county and his ghosts. Instead, she'd thrown the rope around his chest without ever touching him. The crier blinked, startled, then recovered with a throat clear. 12, do I hear 13? He barked, trying to stamp order back into the dust. The new boot rancher smirked, certain the crowd was still with him. 13, he said loud. She'll fetch it back in labor. A shiver passed through the women near the fence, an invisible thread tightening. They knew what kind of labor he meant. And then came a sound no one expected. Don't sell her. It was the little girl again, the one in the boiled corn dress, voice high but steady. She said it plain, not a shout, not a plea, just truth laid down like a card on the table. Heads turned. Her father tried to cover her mouth, but it was too late. The words hung there. And in that pause, even a mule by the trough refused to move, hooves planted hard, ears pinned. Cole March's jaw set. He stepped forward, boots grinding into the hardpan. His voice came out iron flat. 15. Gasps, quick and sharp. Men cursed under their breath. The new boot rancher swore he'd go higher, but the words snagged in his throat. Something in Cole's tone, like a hammerhead striking stone, had stolen the next number from him. The crier licked his lips. 15 once. Twice. He almost whispered the third. Sold. The rope was pressed into Cole's palm. For a heartbeat, he didn't move, staring at the coarse fibers like he was holding fire. Then he wrapped it once around his fist, not tight, not cruel, but enough to lead her away from the square. Lauren's wrists bled a little more when the rope shifted. But in her chest, something steadied. She was not saved. Not yet, but she was not owned by the man with new boots. And for the first time all day, she breathed full. The ledger snapped shut, and with it, the crowd's hunger dimmed. A woman sold, a number written, the day already shifting toward its next cruelty. Folks drifted back to stalls and wagons, whispering in low tones about Cole March. He walked forward slow, rope loose in his hand. Loren didn't flinch, but the raw skin of her wrist stung as the hemp shifted. The air between them felt crowded, though neither spoke. The sign, Dishonor, still hung heavy from her chest. Each step made it knock against her ribs, a drumbeat of shame carved by someone else's hand. They passed the trough. The mule still refused to move, head low, ears flat, as if it bore witness in silence. Children stared. One boy, braver than his mother's grip, whispered, "Why she gotta wear that board?" His question followed her like a burr. At the alley's mouth, Cole paused. He untied the rope from his fist, but didn't cut it. He only glanced at her once, eyes pale as river stone. "You can walk," he said. His voice was gravel, dry and rough, but it carried no malice. Loren rubbed her wrists, red with rope burn. "You paid for me like stock," she said. Not a scream now, just the truth, flat as the land beyond the town. He didn't answer. He turned toward his horse, a big roan with scars on its flank, patient as an old friend. When he lifted her onto the saddle, he didn't grip too tight, but the cedar board still swung from her chest. She hated its weight more than the rope had ever cut. Behind them, the auction sign creaked in the wind. The brand iron waited in its coal box. And somewhere in the dust, a little girl in a yellow dress watched Loren ride away, holding her silence like a secret treasure. They left the town behind without a word. The roof shrank, the dust swallowed the square, and still no one spoke. Loren sat stiff on the roan, the cedar board thumping against her chest with every step. Cole walked beside, hand on the lead, hat brim cutting his face in half. The land stretched bare, all greasewood and shale, the horizon endless. Evening was creeping slow, sky bleeding purple into rust, the kind of color that makes a man remember all the things he's buried. At the creek bed, Cole stopped. He untied the saddle cinch, let the horse drink, then crouched by the fire he built in silence. Sparks snapped loud in the dark, echoing too big for such a small flame. Loren lowered herself down, careful, every move marked by the ache in her wrists. The rope burns were swollen red, one strand of hemp still pressed into the flesh like it meant to stay forever. She held them close to the firelight. Cole's eyes flicked once, then away. "You want salve on that?" She laughed dry. "You'll find me some, then? Out here?" Did the purchase come with mercy, too? He didn't flinch at the bite. He only said, "Didn't buy you for mercy." Then quiet. The board swung when she leaned forward, and she caught in her fist, nails digging into cedar. Her breath shook with the words she finally let out. "They'll brand me yet. Even if I'm not there, the town will talk like the mark's already on me." Cole's jaw worked, but no words came. He knew about marks, the kind you carry on skin, and the kind you carry under it. His sleeve slid back as he turned the meat on the fire, and she saw the white rope of a scar curling up his forearm, pale as old chalk. "Fire burns fast," he said, staring into the flame. "But scars don't fade." Loren stared at the cedar board in her lap, at the word dishonor carved deep. Her fingers traced it, slow, almost gentle. Then she fed it into the fire. The board cracked once, smoke curling sharp as pine. She didn't cry. She just watched the word turn black, watched shame become ash. And Cole march, silent in the orange glow, didn't stop her. The fire dwindled to coals, red as half-shut eyes. Crickets stitched their song through the dark, thin and restless. Loren lay on one side of the bedroll Cole had wordlessly laid out, her back turned, rope burns pressed against her chest so the air wouldn't sting them. Sleep wouldn't come easy. Every time her lashes lowered, she saw the square again. The cedar board slapping her ribs, the laugh of men, the way silence had felt like a fist on her throat. She clenched her jaw against it. Better the ache of teeth than the sound of that crier's voice in her dreams. Across the fire, Cole sat with his rifle resting across his knees. Not pointed, not idle, just there like an extra limb he trusted more than bone. His eyes stayed on the dark where coyotes loped unseen. But his ears held to Lauren's breath. Shallow, then quick, then shallow again. She thought he'd fallen asleep upright until he spoke. "You shouted at me," he said, voice flat, almost testing. Her throat was tight, but she forced words out. "Had to. Else I'd be hauling water for that bootshine rancher till my back broke." Cole poked the coals with a stick. "Sparks lep died. Could have stayed quiet. They'd have branded me quiet," she shot back, sharper than she meant. The fire painted her face in half-light. He saw the rope burns, the bruise under her eye, the set of her mouth. Something in him shifted, though he covered it with stillness. Long minutes passed. The night pressed close, cool desert air running over their skin. Then he said, softer, "My wife once shouted at me. Saved me from taking the wrong trail in a storm. I hated her for it that night. Loved her for it every day after." Loren turned on her side, finally looking at him. His beard caught the firelight, and for the first time she noticed his eyes were not just stone. They had the weight of water behind them, old floods kept back by will alone. She said nothing, but she didn't turn away. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of cedar smoke and damp earth. Cole stayed awake, rifle across his knees, until the first gray smear of dawn touched the horizon. Lauren's breaths grew steady at last. Quiet survival, for one night at least. The morning cracked open cold, the kind that bites through cloth before the sun remembers its work. Loren pulled the borrowed blanket tighter around her shoulders, but her bones still hummed with the night, half dream, half memory. Cole stamped out the last of the coals with the heel of his boot. No wasted words, no wasted movements. He saddled the roan slow, careful, like a man for whom every buckle was a prayer. They didn't speak until they were back on the trail. The land stretched wide, scrubbed dry riverbeds, ridges sharp as broken teeth. Ravens wheeled overhead, their cries ragged. "Were you taking me?" Loren asked finally, voice rough. "Away," Cole said. She almost laughed. "Away's a long road. Rancher." He gave no answer, only touched the brim of his hat against the rising sun. His silence was iron, but it wasn't cruel. By midday, the heat gathered again. Dust rose from the horse's hooves, coating Lauren's throat. Cole passed her a canteen without looking. She drank, water warm but sweet as mercy. On the horizon, a trail of dust kicked up, small at first, then steady. Cole pulled the roan to a halt, eyes narrowing. "Riders," he muttered. Loren twisted, heart hammering. She could just make out 3 shapes, moving fast, sun glinting on something metal. Her stomach turned cold. "Town don't let shame walk off easy," she said. Cole's hand rested on his rifle, but thumb easy but ready. "Thought they'd follow," he admitted. "Didn't think so soon." The roan pawed at the dirt, uneasy. Lauren's rope burns throbbed, as if they remembered the deputy's grip. She tasted fear and dust together. Cole glanced at her then, for the first time without looking away. "If they come for you, they'll have to go through me." The riders grew clearer. 3 deputies, rifles slung, dust coats snapping like flags. Loren swallowed, eyes fixed on the oncoming shapes. For the first time since the block, she felt something strange slip into her chest. Not safety, not yet, but a flicker of it, thin as a candle, lit by the words of a man who had nothing left to lose. And the riders kept coming. They came on fast, 3 riders cutting through the haze of heat. Dust rolled around them like storm clouds, rifles slung casual, but not lazy. Deputies, sent not to uphold law, but to return property. Cole March planted his boots in the dirt and let the roan shift sideways between him and the riders. Loren sat high in the saddle, rope burned still red, wrists trembling against the reins. Her heart thudded so hard she thought the cedar board, though gone now, might still echo it. "Morning, March," the lead deputy called, a grin carved into his sunburnt face. "You picked up a piece that don't belong outside town." Cole's voice came slow, heavy as stone dropped in a well. "Paid fair. Ledger's shut. She's mine." The second deputy laughed, spit dark into the dirt. "Yours to hand back, sure. Sheriff says no which walks free, coin or no coin. We'll take her now, and you'll keep your skin unbruised." The roan blew hard, ears pinned. Lauren's hands clenched tighter on the reins, blood rising again in the rope burns. Something inside her snapped sharp, the same thing that had broken silence back on the block. "Don't call me witch," she said, loud enough to stop their laughter short. "You've no proof, but the lies you tell each other when the crops fail." The deputies stared, caught off guard. A woman was meant to hang her head, not throw words like knives. Cole didn't turn his head, but she saw the corner of his jaw twitch. He shouldered his rifle, not up, not down, just ready. "You heard her. She ain't yours, and she ain't going back." The standoff breathed long. Wind dragged grit across their boots. The deputies shifted, but none made the first move. They'd expected easy work, a rope, and a ride home. They hadn't expected a scarred rancher standing like a wall, or a woman with fire still in her throat. The lead deputy spat again, but this time it missed his mark. "You're a fool, March. She'll drag you under same as the rest." Cole's eyes, pale as dry creek stone, didn't waver. "Then I'll go understanding." The deputies cursed low, wheeled their horses. Dust swallowed them back toward town. Loren let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her body shook, every muscle a string plucked too hard. Cole lowered his rifle, slow. He didn't look at her, but the air between them had changed. Not safety, not yet, but survival, earned one moment at a time. They rode hard until the sun leaned west, chasing shadows across the ridges. Lauren's body ached from the saddle, her wrists screaming with each jolt, but she did not ask to stop. Pride alone kept her upright. When they finally pulled up in a dry wash lined with mesquite, Cole swung down first. He scanned the horizon, hat brim low, every muscle taut as a bowstring. Only when he was sure no dust trails followed did he tie the roan to a thorn branch. "You'll walk from here," he said, voice flat. Loren slid down stiffly, legs trembling. The ground felt foreign, shifting under her feet. She steadied herself with a hand on the saddle and spat dust from her mouth. "You always talk like orders?" she asked. "Only when it keeps us breathing." They started on foot, boots crunching over shale, silence stretching between them. The desert carried every sound. The hiss of their steps, the wheeze of wind through cactus spines, the low rattle of stones tumbling from a lizard's path. After a long while, Loren spoke, her voice ragged. They didn't call me, which till after the fire. Cole glanced, nothing more. What fire? My neighbor's shed. Lightning took it, clean as God's strike. But their grief needed a name they could point at. My name was closest. She lifted her burned wrists. Once you're accused, truth don't matter. It clings like smoke. You can't wash it off. Cole said nothing, but his eyes darkened, as if some old story stirred behind them. They climbed a ridge. From the top, they could see the whole basin spread wide, no riders behind them. The air smelled of sage crushed under boot leather. Loren sat on a rock, breathing hard. She stared at the horizon and whispered, I should have run years ago. Cole leaned on his rifle, gaze fixed far. Running's easy. Surviving's the hard part. She looked at him, then really looked, the scars, the beard gone pale at the edges, the quiet weight he carried like a saddle, never taken off. For the first time, she wondered what rope he'd been bound by, what fire had left its mark on him. The wind whipped between them, tugging hair in her face, tugging silence into his throat. Yet beneath it, something small began to grow, fragile as a green shoot in dry ground. Not trust, not yet, but the soil had been cracked open. That night the desert lay open under a bowl of stars, cold enough that the fire's warmth felt like stolen treasure. The wind scraped along the rocks, carrying the scent of creosote and dust. Loren sat cross-legged close to the flame, arms around her knees, rope burns stiff and angry. She stared into the fire like it might tell her what kind of life waited beyond this night. Cole sat across from her, cleaning his rifle with slow, practiced motions, each stroke as methodical as prayer. Silence stretched long, until Lauren's voice cracked it. You've been staring over your shoulder since the square. You think they'll still follow? Cole didn't look up. Men like that don't forgive easy. Law's a leash they pull when they feel power slipping. She traced the scar ridges on her wrist. Then why not leave me for them? Would have saved you the fight. He paused, cloth resting on the barrel. The fire painted his face in shadow and ember. Because I've seen this before. A town picks someone to carry its sin, brands M for it, then sleeps easier. Once they start, they don't stop. Next time it's a child, or an old man, or me. Loren swallowed. The flames hissed at a damp log, filling the pause. And you? She asked. Who did they choose for you? For the first time, his hand stilled completely. He set the rifle aside, leaned forward with elbows on his knees. His voice dropped low, nearly drowned by the wind. My wife, Maria. Fever took her, but they said it was me. Said I'd starved her of care, of medicine, of hope. Couldn't prove it, but it didn't matter. They buried her with a sermon full of sideways looks, then left me walking with ghosts. His eyes, pale as bone, lifted to hers. Since then, I keep to myself. Safer that way. Until you. The fire popped, throwing sparks like wild stars. Loren blinked against the sudden sting in her eyes. She didn't cry. Not yet, but something shifted. His story weighed different than pity. It was recognition. She reached into the embers with a stick, turning the char of the cedar board's remains. Black flakes crumbled, rising like dark snow. She whispered, they burned my name too. I guess that makes us kin of a sort. Cole watched her, the corner of his mouth tightening. Not a smile, not sorrow, but some weathered mix of both. He poured coffee from the blackened pot, slid the tin cup across the dirt toward her. Drink, he said simply. She wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling the heat bleed into her palms. And for the first time since the square, Loren Bell felt something near to human warmth that wasn't fire. The dawn broke slow, a pale wash of light spilling across the basin. Loren woke stiff, her wrists throbbing. Cole had already stoked the fire, black coffee steaming in a tin pot. He poured, handed her a cup without words. She wrapped both hands around it, letting the heat sink into her bones. Cole sat down, pulled his sleeve back, and began rubbing at his forearm. The scar there was ugly, Rope burned once, healed into a twisted white snake. Lauren's eyes caught it. They tied you too. He grunted. Sheriff's men. Long time back. I got out, but the marks stayed. He looked at her wrists, raw and swollen. Yours will too, if you don't tend him. She studied him for a beat, then tore a strip from her hem, dipped it in the coffee, and reached across the fire. He didn't move at first, just stared at her hand, as if touch were a language he'd forgotten. Finally, he offered his arm. The cloth pressed against the scar, steam rising. He didn't flinch. You treat me like a man, not a master, he said quietly. You treat me like a person, not a price, she answered. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was human. Still, shadows pressed at the edges. The brand waited in town, iron heating in its coal box. The deputy's horses could return on any horizon. Survival was no promise. But for this morning, there was salve, scar, and coffee. For this morning, there was something that looked like alliance. By the third day, the land began to turn cruel. The sun hammered down with no mercy, and the canteen grew lighter each time it passed between them. Food was a strip of jerky gone hard as wood, divided small. Hunger became a quiet ache in their bellies, an old dog that wouldn't quit following. They found no creek, only dry beds where water had once run. Cole scanned each ridge, wary for dust trails, but it was hunger that pressed harder than pursuit. At dusk, they came upon a mesquite stand where rabbits sometimes ran. Cole set a snare, hands steady, but hours dragged with nothing caught. Loren watched him, her body taut with frustration. You'll starve us slow with patience, she said. His eyes flicked to hers, calm but sharp. Patience keeps you alive. Her hands clenched. Patience is what let them tie me. Patience is what lets towns burn names. Before he could answer, she grabbed the snare line from his hands. With a sharp crack of brush, she flushed the rabbits herself, scattering them into the open. One darted, white tail flashing. Loren hurled a stone, years of riverbank play, wrists remembering aim. The rabbit dropped, still. Cole stood frozen a beat, rifle half lifted. Then he lowered it. The firelight later showed no judgment in his face, only a kind of tired surprise. They skinned the rabbit together, silent but not hostile. Grease popped in the pan, filling the air with the sharp, metallic smell of fresh meat. Hunger gnawed, but victory tasted stronger. When Loren took the first bite, she met Cole's eyes across the fire. No words, but something passed between them. Recognition that her defiance had bought their meal. Not weakness, not shame, strength. Cole nodded once, small as a man could make it. And for the first time, Loren felt she had done more than survive. She had chosen. By late afternoon, the basin lay wide and quiet, but Cole's shoulders stayed stiff, eyes sweeping every ridge. The roan twitched its ears, uneasy. Then came the sound, distant at first, but growing. Iron shoes striking stone, the dull rhythm of pursuit. Loren froze, blood rushing her ears. Cole dropped to a crouch, palm pressed to the dirt. When he lifted it, his face was set. 4 riders. Deputies. They found us. Fear spiked in her gut, but so did fire. She would not wear that rope again. She would not let the brand touch her skin. Cole checked his rifle, but his voice was steady. They'll flank. I'll hold them off. You take the roan. Ride north, find cover. No, she snapped, the word raw as torn cloth. You think I came this far to run and leave you? I'll fight. His eyes cut to hers, sharp as a whetted blade. He meant to argue, but the steel in her face stopped him. For the first time, he saw not just a woman dragged from a square, but someone who had chosen defiance, who had killed hunger with a stone, who could not be silenced by law or rope. Then stand with me, he said at last. They moved to the ridge edge, rock at their backs, fire in their lungs. Dust rose fast, deputies closing. Cole leveled a rifle, hands steady as carved oak. Loren gripped a jagged stone, blood from her palms seeping into its cracks, her body taut with defiance. When the deputies crested the hill, they saw not a witch and a broken rancher, but 2 figures standing shoulder to shoulder against the world. The first shot cracked, echoing through the basin. And the legend of Loren Bell and Cole March began to carve itself into the desert silence. The deputies came fast, hooves drumming the ridge, rifles lifted. Dust boiled around them, turning the air thick and sour. Cole steadied his rifle on a rock, breath slow, the world shrinking to a single line of sight. The first shot cracked, echoing across the basin. A deputy jerked sideways in the saddle, half flying, hoarse screaming. He clung for a moment before the dust swallowed him. The other three spurred harder. Loren crouched low, clutching her stone, breath tearing raw. She had no gun, no steel, only the jagged weight in her palm and the stubborn fire in her chest. A bullet shattered rock near her head, stone chips cutting her cheek. Warm blood traced her jaw, salty on her lips. She didn't flinch. Cole fired again, the report shaking the ridge. Another deputy wheeled off, arm hanging limp. But one rider came straight, eyes wild, rope already swinging. Lauren's body moved before thought. She rose, stone high, and when the horse lunged close, she hurled it. The rock struck true, jaw, not hard enough to kill, but sharp enough to stagger. The rope missed, coiling useless in the dirt. Cole's third shot finished what her defiance had started. The deputy tumbled, body limp, dust closing over him. Silence after gunfire is the loudest sound on earth. Only the roan's nervous snort and Lauren's ragged breath filled it. Her cheek bled freely, hot against the cooling wind. Cole lowered his rifle, chest heaving. He looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her. The stone still warm in her hand, the blood on her skin. The rope burns like red ink around her wrists. "You stood," he said, voice rough. "I won," she answered, though her knees trembled beneath her. They burned the deputy's rope in the fire that night. Smoke curled sharp, carrying the stench of tar and sweat. Loren watched it blacken, watched it fall into ash, just as she had the cedar board. Symbols of shame fed to flame, but scars remained. On her wrists, on her cheek, on Cole's arm. When the fire died, only embers glowed, proof that some things survived the burning. They buried the body shallow, not from cruelty, but from time. Coyotes would finish what earth could not, and the desert kept no ledgers. When it was done, Cole sank onto a rock, rifle across his knees. Sweat streaked his face, but his hands were steady. Loren crouched at the fire pit, feeding the last of the deputy's rope into the flames. It curled, spat, then collapsed to black ash. The smell clung bitter in her throat. She reached down, scooped a palm of the ash, and smeared it across the stone beside her, an ugly gray mark. Not letters, not a name, just a sign that she had lived past it. Cole watched her, eyes unreadable. "That your proof?" he asked. Her voice came quiet but firm. "Better ash on a stone than iron in my skin. Let the desert keep it." The wind picked up, tugging at their clothes, carrying smoke into the wide dark. The roan stood tethered, ears flicking, calm now that the fight was done. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped, and another answered. Loren leaned back, blood dried stiff on her cheek, wrists bandaged with strips of her dress. She felt hollow, yet alive in the hollowness. Shame hadn't left her, but it hadn't beaten her either. Cole looked toward the horizon, voice low. "World won't remember this night." "Doesn't need to," she said, eyes on the ash mark. "I will." They sat in silence, two scarred souls warmed by a dying fire. No triumph, no cheers, just survival, earned, bitter, real. And in the hush between them, the desert held its breath, as if the land itself knew a new legend had taken root. Not of victory, but of the small defiance that kept a woman alive when all else had tried to bury her. By the next night, the desert had settled back into its endless hush. The fire was small, just enough to keep the cold from gnawing their bones. Loren sat close, her cheek marked by a healing cut, wrists swaddled in cloth. Cole leaned back against a rock, rifle across his lap, his eyes turned to the sky. Neither spoke for a long time. The quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was the kind of quiet that lets wounds breathe. At last Loren said, almost to herself, "They'll tell the story different in town. They'll say I was taken back, or burned or branded. They'll bury the truth in gossip. Cole's voice came low, rough as gravel rolled in a creek. Then the desert'll hold the truth for us. Ain't the first time land remembered what people tried to forget. She nodded, staring at the scar on her wrist. It was ugly, red against her skin, but it was hers now, not theirs. Proof not of shame, but of survival. The fire cracked, sparks climbing into the dark. A coyote sang far off, and the roan flicked its ears in answer. Cole tipped his hat forward, closing his eyes. Loren stayed awake, watching the ash shift in the fire pit. With one finger, she drew a line through it, simple and straight. A mark that said, "I was here. I endured." The night carried it away, but the act itself lingered. And so the tale of Loren Bell and Cole March settled into silence. Not triumph, not victory, but survival carved into scars, smoke, and stone. Around campfires, some say you can still hear it in the desert wind. A woman's voice breaking the square, a man's vow to stand, a rope burned to ash. But the question is left for whoever listens. When the crowd falls quiet and the rope is placed in your hands, do you walk away or do you stand?